leaders. Welcome to CTRL+ALT+DELETE with Lisa Duerre live. I'm Lisa Duerre, your guide through the ever-evolving landscape of leadership and tech. We're breaking down barriers and bringing our community together in real time. So whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your office chair or catching the replay later, please know that your voice matters. Speaking of voices, that's what firm leadership is all about. Listening, inviting wisdom, and embracing the collective intelligence of our teams. Because let's face it, no one leader has all the answers, and that's where you come in. As we dive into today's discussion, please be an active participant. Drop your thoughts, questions, and insights into the comments below. This isn't just my podcast, it's ours. Together, we're rebooting Leadership Drive. And before we kick things off, I'd like to mention that this podcast and live stream experience is brought to you by RLD Group. As your host and the CEO of RLD Group, I'm grateful for the opportunity to collaborate and bring in this podcast to life. Together, we're committed to empowering organizations, teams, and leaders like you, and your engagement in this conversation is invaluable. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation, get comfy, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's make some magic happen. Hey there, everybody. Lisa Duerre here, CTRL+ALT+DELETE with yours truly, live. I'm so glad you're here. Today's topic is something I think that everyone needs to know about. So we're bringing it, we're coming at you real talk, and we are going to talk to you about mental health and well-being in the workplace as leaders and in your communities as well. So we titled today, Mindful Leadership, Nurturing Well-Being with Firm Principles. And the reason we wanted to talk about that is here's my statistic for the day. And then I'm going to talk about who's going to join us. But the statistic I want to share with you is 52% of people within the tech industry have suffered from anxiety or depression at some point. This is from the British Interactive Media Association. I can tell you I'm part of that 52%. I have had anxiety and depression. I have had bouts of them that have been debilitating. I have done things to help myself, and I've shared these stories before. But I think if you realize 52%, that's over half of your organization at some point is going through this. If we're not talking about it, we are not being of service to our teams or the humans inside tech or our organizations and our customers. So with me today, I have Gabes Coplan, my friend Gabes. We bring her up onto the stage. Gabes, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Gabes and I've spent over 20 years working together. She's seen some of my anxiety moments and my depressive moments as well as colleagues and friends. And we're here today because Gabes was saying, I think this is important. We need to talk about it. So through the lens of RLD Group's firm model, we're going to dive into mental health and well-being in the workplace. And Gabes, I know that I know you really well, but if someone doesn't know you, what is something you want them to know that's informing our conversation today? Because you bring so much wisdom into this conversation. I mean, I can say all these wonderful things, but how might you describe yourself so the audience knows where you're coming from on this topic?
Yeah, so this is near and dear to my heart. I too have had my own personal episodes of mental health challenges, so much so that I actually had to take a break from work. And I never thought I would do that. And through that experience, I realized how important it was to share that, to let people know that they're not alone. And it's also informed how I approach my coaching, so much so that I am what we call a somatic coach. And so I work a lot with people in tech and outside of tech who need to find a way to bring balance and well-being into their lives so they can be the best leaders possible. So it's near and dear to my heart doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Gabes. So this is an interactive experience. If you want to do us a favor, drop in the chat that you're here, any questions you have or comments on this conversation. If you are aware of this topic being real in your world, that would help. We want to make sure that your voices are in this conversation too. And I think for me, the reason it's near and dear to my heart, having already told you about my own episodes, I did take a medical leave. I have done a lot of therapy and all kinds of non-traditional therapy ways to support my mental health. And I think for me, burnout is a mental health issue. And since we're talking about rebooting, I think this is the conversation we need to start with. So Gabes, when you think about that statistic of the 52% of people, what do you want to say about that or presence in your own experience to just bring that point home?
It's all around us. We all know somebody who may silently be suffering from mental health. It could be stress in their lives. It could be things going on at work. It could be things going on at home. Everybody's got something, is what that statistic says. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we share our experiences, the more that we educate people on the options available to them. Because the one thing I hear a lot is, I don't want to do therapy. You don't have to do therapy. There's, depending on your goals and objectives, there's a lot of different ways to get help. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take medication or you have to get therapy. And if you do, that's great, because those are there for you as well as an option. But I really want to highlight that people have choice in how they approach the help that they're looking for and whether they even reach out for help. So,
Mhm. I appreciate what you're saying, because one of the things when I mean, I've had a lifetime of learning on this topic, and I remember when I took the medical leave, it's basically the doctor telling me I was burnt out, I needed to take a break, my team recognizing it and also trying to support me, because I felt love and support from this team, and my family thinking like, "What's gonna happen to you? Like, you're not okay." And I didn't realize how anxious and depressed like that fueling the burnout that I was experiencing, until I was able to sleep and, like, process and give myself space. And I think one of the things for me that I we love to do in our burnout prevention workshops is help people look through the lens of the M in the FIRM model, mindfulness, right?
mhm,
What does mindfulness mean? How can mindfulness help you as a leader, help your team and your organization? And I would say one of the things I think that's contributing to anxiety in tech right now is this always on, never good enough, gotta get it done, everything's important, this environment that people are in, and that turns then into their thoughts and their feelings around everything, which is certainly something I fell into. So, Gabes, in the work that you do somatically with your clients and with our clients as partners with us too, what's one thing that people can do right now if they don't wanna go to get therapy or they don't wanna take medication, but they're feeling it in the moment today? Like, have you ever showed up into I already know the answer. I'm sure there's been times you've showed up to a client on Zoom, they pop up and you're like, "Okay, we're not gonna do what I thought we were gonna do." What do you do to help people in the moment with the tools that you have?
well, one of the things that is always really, and we do it, right? It's moving.
Mhm.
We call it blithering. But a lot of times clients are going from meeting to meeting. They don't have a lot of time, so they might have a couple seconds to. So just even getting up and moving your body, like literally shake your body and then sit back down, because we build up energy. For many people, they're building up energy. The energy has nowhere to go and it just sits there. And so just being able to release that energy and then taking a couple deep breaths and then go into your next meeting. So that's one thing you can do. The second thing is you could ask yourself, what is the sensation? What's the feeling I have and where is it at? Just taking that time to ask, what's the sensation and where is it in my body? That allows you to get back into your body and out of what's going on in your head. Just doing that very simply. That also is a break to give yourself a chance to reset, because it's really about your battery being so depleted and not having enough to keep you going. And that's when burnout, disease, depression, anxiety really starts to show up for people. So, those are a couple things.
It's so cool, I love it. Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about recently, I've been learning a lot about nutrition and how that, factors into mental health too,
Mhm,
and how processed foods are like it's not like we don't know this, but, like, how much that really plays into it, and I always just think, "What are people eating at work? And are they eating at work? Are they hydrating, right? Are you moving between meetings too?" Because one of the things I learned when I had my moment of burnout and took that medical leave was I wasn't taking care of myself,
mhm,
right? And it's not like I ran to a therapist the day I took my medical leave. I went to sleep, and I started eating better, and I started sleeping better, and I started hydrating more, and I think that sometimes there's things we can do that we feel like when you're so far gone that there's nothing I can do, it's just everything sucks, right? The cynicism kicks in and,
yep,
snarkiness, I know sometimes tears, for people, and I think what happens is we lose our ability to innovate because we're stuck in this fight, flight, freeze mode, right? Where we're just constrained and tight. So I love this blithering. I mean, when I learned it too, I was so grateful for it. And I also think one of the things that you've taught me is just ringing the temple gong. Like when you do the side to side and you're moving your body that way, and I can do that in my chair.
mhm.
And so I'm just I love when you bring these tools to our clients and to the community, because there are things we can do. And so one of the questions I have on my mind when we think about these statistics and this conversation, it's like, whose responsibility is mental health and well-being in the workplace, right? Some people think, well, it's the individual's problem, right? And I believe, I stand for, as a leader, you are here to care for your people. And that doesn't mean you have to do everything for them, but paying attention, being mindful, checking in. Just yesterday, I had a client who was managing a performance issue, and the conversation we had was around, do you know what's going on behind the Zoom screen? Have you checked in on what's really going on versus the surface of this much stuff isn't getting done?
Mhm.
So when you think about that and just helping leaders understand how they might check in and care for the people, what tips do you have there, Gabes?
Well, I think you honed in on it. Is asking, "How's it going?"
Mhm.
But I do wanna go back to something you said about, whose responsibility is it?
Mhm.
I'm actually opposite of you, and I
Mhm.
can share just I believe it's the individual's responsibility, and the reason why I say that, as leaders, it's our responsibility to check in with our people,
Mhm.
but your mental health is your responsibility protecting it, because you have one body, you have one
Mhm.
life, you have one chance to take care of yourself, in your workplace.
Mhm.
Your leader may not be thinking about it in those terms. So if you're waiting for somebody to take care of you, that's going to be really hard, especially when you're in environments where you're going so fast, right? Because they may not have the capacity to take care of you. So I think as leaders, we have responsibilities to check in with our people. But I used to say, like, after I had my experience, when I went back to the same environment that I was in, I would tell myself, protect your mental health. You're here to protect your mental health. And so I'd really be very conscientious about the things I was doing, making sure that, as you said, getting sleep, encouraging even people who were working for me, have you taken time off? So there's a tip. Have you
Mhm.
taken time off? Do you have people on your team? Because we all have those achievers, but are you taking time off? Are you going to bed early? Why are you checking your emails at 11 o'clock at night?
Mhm.
That's great, but is that you should be sleeping or
Yeah.
reading
Yeah.
or doing something for yourself.
Mhm.
So I think that for me, it's an and so as a leader, walking the talk, because it's one thing to say, like, oh, I care about the well-being of my team and my organization, but if you're not exhibiting those
Mhm.
attributes and those skills, what do you think your team's watching you? You're the example, and then
Yep.
you're going to think, do I need to be doing my email at 11 o'clock, or do I need to be doing that? And there's a ripple effect when it
Mhm.
comes to that.
Yeah, yeah, one of the things that's on my mind when I think about the responsibility, it's absolutely about walking the talk, and I do believe leaders have a responsibility to oversee the well-being of their organization and their team, and yes, you absolutely have to take care of yourself as a person,
Mhm.
of course.
It's all of it.
But if you are not prioritizing for this team, and you are loading up more and not checking in, and you are not walking the talk, you're failing in your responsibility as a leader,
Mhm,
right? So to me, that's where I was going with it, so I really appreciate the "and" we're looking at, because Um, it's so interesting to me when we think about, people talk so much about time management. There's no time, right? Which causes stress, which leads to chronic stress, which leads to burnout and mental health moments, mental health crisis. And I think it's really about prioritization. And like you said, you said, I need to prioritize my mental health. I know when I went back to the same environment, I started having walking meetings instead of sitting in my chair. I
mhm,
would ask people if we could meet outside so I could get some nature. So I had more control than I thought. And I gave myself those moments to support my own mental health and resource myself to be at my best. So
mhm,
I think it's the real question is, as a leader, what's your philosophy? How are you leading your team and your organization? And yes, there are well-being days and days that we take off, but if you're requiring people to work or check emails, that's a whole different game too, right?
mhm,
Yeah, it's almost like you might be phoning it in and not really caring about it, right? If you're expecting people to respond on weekends and that's not their job, right? What other behaviors or items do you see, Gabes, that might help people just kind of assess for themselves? Like, oh, I intellectually I think I'm doing this, but in the real world, I'm not really walking the talk.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been coaching someone. I just wrapped up an engagement with a client, and he never took lunch. he worked through lunch. Now, you have lunch meetings, but he didn't even eat. Like a lot of times we'd be meeting in the late afternoon, like mid-afternoon. I just ask him some, hey, did you have lunch today? No, I haven't had lunch. I'll grab something. Something as simple as nourishing your body
Mhm.
and, spending a little time, that goes a long ways. The other thing that I see is taking vacations and not going on vacation. You're checking your emails, and I've had, I don't know how many leaders I've had. Okay, Gabes, I take a vacation, but the first couple days I'm doing email, and then I taper off, and then right before I go back, a couple days before I go back, I get back online and check in. So they
Mhm.
have so a week-long vacation is really only like 2 days maybe that they didn't check in.
Mhm.
The rest of the time they're checking in, and everything will still be there. It'll still be there when you get back. And it seems so
Yeah.
simple, and sometimes I say, "How do you bend time?" You can bend time if you want to. And so I
Mhm.
think it goes back to what you're saying, Lisa, about, having choice.
Mhm. Mhm.
Choose you, people, choose you.
One of the things I want to bring up on this, Gabe, so M for mindful, right? I
Mhm,
think one of the greatest gifts I've received in my career is colleagues that were mindful of me, caring enough about me to like check in
mhm,
and support me when I was having those moments. Cause you can tell when you work with someone long enough, you can tell. And I think one of the greatest antidotes to anxiety, depression, burnout that comes free is checking in, like you said, how's it going, right? And I think being mindful of your relationships and
mm,
not jumping straight into the task at hand or what's next, and just pausing for a minute, maybe it's even just saying, what are we celebrating? What are you proud of? It
mhm,
doesn't have to be like, are you okay? How'd you sleep? It's always a wonderful thing to figure out from people, right? So when it comes to mindfulness and the firm model and the connection of colleagues and purpose, right? If you're clear on purpose and you feel supported by colleagues, has that been your experience too? Do you see that as a tool that's available that can help, or is this just me having my own experience?
No, I think it's beautiful what you're saying. It's so important for us to get to know each other. And it doesn't, I'm sorry, people, but it does not matter that you're remote from each other. It's called a phone.
Mhm,
Having those connections, because when you work at it and you have you know each other outside of just the tasks that are at hand, what's really powerful is that you will know based on people's energy. I remember being in a meeting when frankly, I was depressed.
yeah.
And my colleague called me up afterwards and said, "What's up with you?" I was really quiet. Usually I talk. I was really quiet. And I just sat there and I started crying. And I said, I'm not doing well. And she gave me such a beautiful gift. She said, "Gabes, you need to take care of yourself. And we got this and we're good." It was and it was just from her calling to check up on me. Now, that doesn't
Mhm,
mean every conversation you're gonna have, someone's gonna be crying and stuff, but people are stressed out. They have stressors all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's just work related. And so I think what you're saying, Lisa, it's a really simple and easy thing to do. And as much as people like to say that they don't want to talk about this at work, we spend so much time together at work with people.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. I just wanna say publicly, Gabes, after 20 something years of working with you, it was always nice to know that you had my back, and we used to joke about I had a uniform. When I was really depressed, I wore the same clothes all the time, and she's like, "You're
Purple
wearing that
socks.
again. What's up?" "Okay, Dury," right? Back then I was Elliot, but like, "What's going on?" And the other thing she would notice is how many eye appointments I had on my calendar because I was trying to have a mental health break, right? "Boy, you sure go to the eye doctor a lot." I'm like, "I know, right?" And so we would, over time we built the rapport of like we have tells and signs and you could see things you could see. And oh my gosh, so many times when working together, we would look at each other and go, okay, I got you. You take that. You got this one. Okay, cool. And I think for leaders, when we think about how do you put me in, coach, I'm going to sub for you for a day or a week, or I'll cover that meeting, or you know what, go do what you need to do to be okay. What a gift that is to just see the other person and make the offer. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes we're just so siloed and then what's next? What's next? What's next? We're not looking at each other or understanding. And you've just been such a gift to me, Gabes, in my career,
Thank you.
of giving that space to me. So I want to highlight like that. That was really helpful. I mean, we laughed a little. I was like, oh yeah, found me out. Does everyone else figure it out? Does everyone else know I'm anxious and depressed? Shit, right?
Well,
Like, ah,
well, that's because we both share the very similar humor,
yeah,
self-deprecating humor about ourselves. And
yeah.
I will say too that people want to show up professional. I struggle, like, what does professional look like? There's a vulnerability in not being perfect. There's vulnerability in asking for help. I mean, all those things are real, and yet you're not the only ones.
Mhm.
And so it's so the more that we talk about it, the more that we highlight what goes on and our challenges as humans, having the human experience, we can take away the stigma of what it means when someone um, a has an episode or has a situation and they're on the roller coaster of life, because you're not going to stay there. You're not going to stay there. You're going to come out of it.
Yeah.
There's always light and darkness. And yet, as colleagues and friends and coworkers, and how you show up, you're not going to show up as your best when you are feeling that way. It's just, you're not going to hide it. You think you are, but you're really not. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what you and I learned about working together for so
Mhm.
long.
I have some chats here. I want to bring them up, but I want to ask you, Gabes, have you ever lost it in a meeting?
Oh, were you like completely like,
I mean, I know I have, and I'm happy to share mine, but have you ever just had one of those meetings and you're just like, you weren't okay, you weren't advocating for yourself, you weren't doing what you needed, or maybe not, maybe it's not, I don't know, wherever. Like,
I'm more of a silent type.
yeah, yeah, I'm a loser, right? I'm like, ah, right? And I don't think I've ever seen you lose it in a meeting.
I'm more of the silent type, right? And then afterwards, like, "Arr." So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is you might shut down, where I might extrovert my internal frustration. You're losing it in a meeting is you stopping participating.
Yeah, stress
This
relief,
is so
right?
important.
Freeze,
Mhm.
fight, fawn, that's, we have different stress responses levels.
Yeah, it's so interesting because mine is tears, right? Or right, I feel like tense like this, and I think that sometimes knowing each other's responses is so helpful for the leader or the team to go, like you said, they call, you're quiet, what's up, right? Mine you can't hide. They go, oh, she's crying, and I go, hey, these tears are a stress release. I'm just overwhelmed, right? And I know to say that now, right? But it's so interesting because not everybody responds the same.
Well,
So I'm listening.
I love how your neck gets red
Oh,
when you
my neck
say
gets red,
these.
right? Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, "Oh, you're."
My neck gets red. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And but see, that comes with knowing each other,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
and yeah, giving people a chance to get to know you.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like a link is here. A link, I'm so glad you're here. Let's bring up your comment and bring your voice in. Let's see. I love this conversation. Let's see. I love this conversation about responsibility for your own well-being. I believe organizations' responsibility is to create spaces and safety to have the conversations about well-being. Well-being is something that's unique for everybody. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because if you don't feel safe at work, you're not talking about your own well-being, that's for dang sure,
Yep.
right? Yeah, thank you. And it looks like there's one more here from Alinka. I hear many times in tech that everybody recognizes the importance of well-being, but afraid to talk about it at work. Yeah, we were just talking about it today, like the powers in our story and how do we admit we're not okay? It doesn't mean we're so broken we can't get back, but if it's a bad day, I mean, when my mom was dying, my team knew it was a rough time. Like I had months of really hard days. And they would go, how are you? I'm like, I'm sad. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm also glad to be here. So I think presencing that is helpful. I mean, what do you want to say about Alinka's comments, Gabes?
Well, one, and Lenka, thank you so much, because I totally agree with you, creating the space, right? And the safety. And then also too, being afraid to talk about it, which is why we're talking about it.
Mhm.
And the thing is, it's men and women. My dudes out there, they experience this as well. And I think it's so important for all of us to have that kind of support, and like, everybody needs a bestie at work,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Have that support, and also too, to just talk about it, and it'll be, there's a range of stress, right? You're always going to have stress. And what we're trying to say is, one, talking about it, figuring out what tools work for you, what strategies work for you. There's some really cool things out there that people are doing, and having curiosity around it, because what might work for one person doesn't work for another person.
Mhm.
Some people, it's all about doing breath work. Other people, they might need to go work out and pump iron. Some people, they need to take a walk in nature. Other people need to talk about it. But finding what works for you so that you have an outlet, so that you have choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the things I was thinking about, I didn't know how to formulate this as a question because it's coming up as you're talking about all these things, but a quick story from Lisa Duerre. So I was going to do a 360. I completed a 360, asked a bunch of people about one of our clients and was bringing that data back to the client, popped onto Zoom, and he was clearly not okay and trying to keep it together. And I knew I had to deliver this data, this news, right? This information. And I just knew, Gabes, that wasn't the right time. And
Mhm.
so I said, with curiosity, like, how are you? How was your day? What's going on? What do you want to share? What are we, in that moment? And I could just tell, I'm like, are you anxious? Potentially, are you anxious about the 360? And he was like, no, I'm just having a really hard day. And so I took the paperwork, right, put it down. I said, okay, let's talk, right? We're done. And to this day, he still says to me that that was a moment when he realized how important it was to be present to read, even on Zoom,
Mhm.
how the other person's doing. And really, he had way more going on with, like, he was getting promoted, imposter syndrome, and how much is going on in the world, and do I have what it takes, and all of that was underneath. So he had to get his nervous system regulated before he could even receive the glowing feedback that was in that 360.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things I want to invite the listeners live and on the replay is, how might you be 3% more intentional when you show up on that camera? 3% more intentional, right? I'm not asking you to go so far out because you're busy, but what becomes possible when you just get centered and grounded on that other person before you jump into the task at hand?
Mhm.
That was, I will never forget that day. And he still talks about it. And I think it's important. So I just wanted to presence that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You took the time to connect, and by the way, again, the 360 is not going anywhere. It'll be there for the next time you talk. It's the same with email, people. It's the
Yep.
same with meetings. All of that will still be there.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. Janice has a comment here about stress flags. You two are awesome. Thank you, Janice. You're awesome too. I love this conversation around actually expressing your stress response. Yeah, well, let's talk about some more stress response, Gabes. I think that it's a word we know, but let's bring it into the fold. And Janice, feel free to chat it up and we'll bring your voice in. When I learned that crying was a stress response, it was such a gift. I walked around for years being afraid to cry at work and thinking that it would make me look weak or broken. And
Mhm.
I remember working 7 days a week for like 3 weeks and then asking for some comp time. This is early in my days. And they said, no, but we'll give you a gift certificate for dinner. And I was like, I don't have time for dinner. And I just started crying, right? And then I'm like, and they're like, what, right? It was like, what do we do with this woman? And I was like, I don't have time for dinner. I just need a break, right? That really happened. And I know you're not shocked because you've known me for how long. But man, if that leader had said to me, "Oh, I get that. Yeah, this doesn't feel like it's rewarding or like recognizing what you need is a nap."
Mhm.
It's pretty clear you need a nap. Why don't you take the day off? Like, that would have been, right? But then I left feeling weak and broken, and they're not gonna trust me now, and I lost my tears in this meeting. And years later, the wonderful Brian Trascos and I were talking, Brian from the Somatic Coaching Academy, and he was on my podcast, and he was talking about tears, and he was like, "That's a stress response. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. You're completing the stress cycle."
Yes. Yeah.
Completing the stress cycle? Like, what are you talking about? Yes, Brian, yes. So now I'm like, "Oh, I'm just gonna let him flow and say, I'm completing the stress cycle." You
Mhm.
know? What do you
Yeah,
wanna say about
I
that?
tell clients that all I work with a lot of men, and at some point they cry with me, and I'm like, "Yes!" It was
Yep.
like in the inside. I don't do that to them, but I'm like,
You're like, "Wow, crying."
yeah, like, they're feeling it. One of the things that we do in our somatic work is we deal with bioenergetics. So we're dealing with people's energy. And I know we're at time, but one of the things is just noticing your energy. Do you take in energy and then you kind of hold on to it where you might be bouncing your legs, you're bouncing up and down. You don't even realize that you're doing it. That's you trying, you're taking in energy. And then what do you do with it? Some
Mhm.
people need to, release the energy that way. Other people, might have to, maybe they're a little more like lethargic or not really, very slow. Then you have to think about your energy. So it's all about your energy management and it just shows up in different ways. So Lisa, you crying, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel resourced after when it's done,
Yes.
right? My battery is it's a reboot moment,
Yep.
right? Well, Gabes, thank you for your courageousness, for your heart, for your passion, for being my guest today to talk about mental health and well-being in the organization and in the humans in tech. This conversation needs to continue. Alenka, Janice, thank you for bringing your voices in. It's so wonderful when we get to engage with the audience. And
Mhm.
as we wrap up, Gabes, I know you just said a lot about energy, but if you could plant a seed in every human being that's listening to this, to help them feel more resourced or equipped to do what's necessary for them. What's your final thoughts on all the different things we said? Well, how would you like to summarize it today?
You are safe, you are loved, and you are worthy.
Mm. You are safe, you are loved, you are worthy, and crying completes the stress response because that's what makes me want to do right now. Yes, Gabes, as are you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, listen, we are going to continue this conversation offline. Put your comments in here. Please share this conversation if it meant something to you. We'd love to continue the conversation with you in your organization here on the podcast. Gabes, I just love you. I'm so grateful for this conversation. Everyone, you are loved, you are safe, you are worthy. And until next time on Control Alt Delete with Lisa Duerre, we'll say thanks and make it a great day.
Bye.
Bye.